What's something that completely changed your life, but seemed insignificant at the time? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. Accepting a temporary job in a boring field for 3 months because I wasn't having success finding a job in my desired field. Absolutely loved it and led to a great career in a field I had zero interest in examining. I would have never accepted a permanent job in that field, but was willing to eliminate time for 3 months. Answer: similar tale. 3 years ago, I was so burned out on my 15-year content marketing freelancing career, and AI was making everything so much worse. I thought, maybe I can get a full-time marketing job somewhere, and that will help my burnout. After sending out 600 applications in 6 months with a handful of interviews but no offers, including positions where I had an in and even 2 different 7th-round interviews, I decided, what the hell, and applied for a part-time admin role I was way overqualified for in a totally different field. I was offered the admin job and was literally about to hit send on the rejection email due to the low wage. But something in me said, take it. I started working there 2 years ago, viewing it as a way to get health insurance while trying to recover from marketing burnout by dropping the clients who were causing the most frustration. But I fell in love with the new field. Turns out my supervisor and I both feel I'm a great fit to advance in it, and I actually feel consistently excited about work for the first time in my life. I'm on track to go full-time with a promotion in the spring. I feel so fortunate, especially considering the absolutely crushing job market right now. Story 2. I took this accounting class in high school. I really liked the teacher and had a lot of respect for him, but I still struggled in the class nonetheless and decided that I didn't want to continue with accounting anymore. But then one day he stops me in the hall with an excited look on his face and he asks, "So you signed up for accounting too, right?" Yeah, totally. I lied because I didn't want to disappoint him. Then I signed up for the class because I didn't want to be a liar. I'm in my 30s now, and you can probably guess what I do for a living. Answer: when I was HS, I tried out for the wrestling team. It was a 2-a-day practice. I got slaughtered the first session. Like not even from wrestling, but from the conditioning drills. For 2 hours, I threw up twice in the warm-up. Fast forward, I'm sitting in the middle of the kitchen exhausted, explaining to my mom it's just too hard, and I don't. She's babying me and agreeing with me, saying I don't have to do it if I don't want to. Cue my step, Dad walking in with a new pair of wrestling shoes because I had to practice without any, needless to say, not wanting to look like a wimp. I said nothing and took the shows and went to practice. I ended up staying and learned a lot. Story 3. At the behest of my wife, I quit drinking soda for Lent earlier this year. That created a sort of snowball effect where I sort of challenged myself to start taking better care of myself. Started with the soda, cut back on other sweets and snacks, started jogging about 4 to 5 days a week, and I'm proud to say I've dropped 25 kilograms since spring. Answer: I had a similar one. Challenged myself to take a break from adult beverage at the start of the year for a New Year's resolution. Thought it might be 1 to 3 months. Ended up being 5 years now. I was never an alcoholic, but I now just no longer consider any amount of adult beverage healthy. I feel a lot better improving my health when I'm not suffering a setback every few weeks. Adult beverage does a lot of damage. The cancers it causes are basically every part of your body it touches while it's in your system. Story 4. I was on the other side of the country, taking a small vacation before I started my doctoral studies. Instead of going out my last night there, I decided to just stay in. Lo and behold, a girl I'd known since I was a little kid popped on AIM. We passed notes in middle school, were pen pals for years, then email, but communication started to drop off around college. We talked about one day trying to get together to reminisce. Anyway, I flew back home and got into my car at the airport. Paused for a moment, said screw it, and drove the 4-hour trip to where she lived. I checked with her first. That was all it took. We fell in love, have been married 15 years, and have a 3-year-old little boy. Answer: I have a similar story. A good friend of mine in HS moved up north after graduating. 9 years later, he finds my Facebook and sent me a message. We admitted that we were perfect together. It was so obvious, and we both immediately felt it. Turns out, we live just a 5-minute drive from each other now, so we met up at an abandoned baseball field. That baseball field incident resulted in us having twins 9 months later. It'd been a decade, and we are a very happy little family. I never in a million years thought he would like me as more than a friend. It was cool going to our 10-year reunion together, and I was pregnant. He's shown me what true love is and how you treat someone you love. Story 5. My flatmate and I wanted to go for a hike in the mountains, but neither of us had a car, and it was off the rail line, so you could only get there by car. I asked her if she knew anyone with a car who was free that weekend, and she said, yeah, she knew a guy. I jokingly asked, is he hot? And she said, hey, sort of. Well, he took us on that hike, and he and I hit it off. Probably would never have met him if he hadn't been the guy she worked with who had a car. Married 10 years now. Story 6. Nothing too huge, but maybe a little bit interesting. I had a regular checkup with an eye doctor, thinking that I needed a new pair of glasses. He did his thing, and as we reached the end, he said something along the lines of, yeah, your right eye is fine, but glasses won't help on your left one because of the astigmatism. And that you'd have been that had I not said in passing that it had only gotten worse in the last couple of years. This caught his attention, and he referred me to a specialist. I was then diagnosed with keratoconus and received stabilizing surgery. All is good. The biggest game changer for me were the hard contact lenses that not only made the world HD, but also gave me back three-dimensional perception, which I didn't know I had lost. Answer, hey, me too. I was staying in Nairobi for 6 months and figured I should update my glasses since it'd been a while. The optometrist was having trouble for a while before sitting down and said, you need to see a specialist to get diagnosed with keratoconus. Turns out she was the keratoconus specialist for the country and pretty much just referred me to herself. Story 7. My father got transferred to another U.S. state for work. My sister and I disliked this new state, so we decided to apply and work at a summer camp so we didn't have to be miserable all summer. Met my future husband at the camp as we were fellow counselors. We have been married 42 years. Story 8. Fifth grade teacher taught us how to take notes in outline form. I, main subject 1A.11, subpoint 1, 2, subpoint 2B, point 22, main subject 2. I disliked it at the time. Later in high school and college, it became one of the best tools to help me focus and take notes in class, study for exams, and plan essays. It was a huge help in my later academic success. Thanks, teacher. Answer. I'm a speed reader and was in my primary school's gifted and talented program. My husband has dyslexia and needed some additional support services, speech therapy and occupational therapy. My school didn't teach study and note-taking skills. His did. Guess which one of us barely passed high school and which had good enough grades to get into whatever university they wanted. Story 9. I was poor of in a dead-end relationship with the father of my 2 kids. He wanted me to be a stay-at-home mom, but we were always on the verge of homelessness. So I took on a one-day assignment as an admin assistant so we could afford rent. I went to the job with only enough gas in the car to get there and back. At the end of the day, the hiring manager, who was a rock star VP working way too hard at this university in a very unusual, temporary role, asked me to return the following day. I told her I didn't have the gas money to make the 45-minute commute work. She gave me $50 for GIM and practically demanded that I come back the next day. I ended up working for her for 4 years until her job ended, during which time she encouraged me to finish my degree. She also helped me with references and networking connections into my next job. My partner at the time was really unsupportive of this despite continuing to get fired from his jobs for non-performance. I broke off the relationship and ended up working my way into a 6-figure job due to her mentorship. I'm now married for 6 years to my best friend, together for 13, and we own a home in one of the best cities in the world. Edit, thanks for the kind words. I am consistently reminded of how lucky I was to be in the right place at the right time. My mentor's kindness that day will never be forgotten. I still keep in touch with her nearly 20 years later. Answer, I'm so happy for you. As an administrator at a university with no real idea or clear path of where to go, I'd love to hear what you ended up doing or what kind of path you followed. Or was it related to your degree? And I remain doomed to write minutes and raise POs for the rest of my career because my stupid degree focused mostly on how to use Flash. Story 10. Competed in a public speaking competition. An English teacher signed me up. No idea why. I had really struggled in school up till then. I did not have supportive or loving parents and thought I was stupid. Another teacher coached me, stayed with me after school. Placed third my first year and first the next 2. I'm now a trial attorney. Changed my whole life. Story 11. Sure, I'll apply to work at this school I've never heard of. Over a decade later, still love the place. Story 12. Sitting at an air show around 16 years old, watching the fighter jets rip overhead. I could do that. What started off as a thought and people laughing at my goal lead to looking up flight programs and then taking flight training in college. Well, I never flew fighter jets, but it led me to be an airline captain today. Story 13. About 10 years ago, I was exhausted from work one night, but decided to go to the bars with some coworkers for one of their wives' birthdays anyways. Met this awesome girl there at last call, and we really hit it off. Long story short, we just had our first son yesterday. Story 14. I was working a PRN, or as needed, gig because I needed a little extra cash. After a particularly bad day at my full-time job, I called my PRN boss to see if they had any hours should I quit the FT job. There was an excited discussion amongst the higher-ups because they'd apparently been hoping I'd go full-time. Anyway, they created a role for me and I've never looked back. My salary has doubled in the last 2 years. I'm awaiting a company car, make my own schedule, and I truly love my job and my coworkers. Best boss I've ever had. So glad I picked up the phone that day. Answer. This made me think of my recent job switch. Straight out of college, I worked for a company for 5 years, and I left amicably because they didn't have a particular niche I was looking to gain experience in. I was close with many of my colleagues, and years later, I was venting about my now former boss. My former colleague told me to send him my resume, and I said I'm never coming back. He told me to STFU and humor him. It's how we talk to each other. Love him. Ended up taking the job. We work for the same boss now, and I'm so happy to be back. Story 15. After a relocation and then a breakup, I had major decisions to make BC. I lost my parents by then too. I went through a temp agency that gave me a chance at a company as a temp. It worked out. I worked there for almost 9 years and met my wife. Total happenstance. Still together after 22 years. Still happy. We look at each other. That's all. Story 16. After 5 years of taking a language, I switched to a different one my senior year of HS. The teacher for language 1 found me and invited me to her AP course. I have a PhD in that language and its literatures because of a 5-minute conversation she took the time to have. Story 17. Just do what the doctor said and ask for them to give recommended lifestyle changes. I go to the gym 2x week in PT. I'm taking my meds as prescribed. My diet is generally fine. I lost 50 cells in 3 months. Story 18. I no longer give my first feelings to a big conversations. I often recognize strong emotions will rise in whatever the conversation, and I take time to reflect on them before I respond to a situation. Thankfully, I am with a partner that is patient, and we have never had a miscommunication between us. I thoroughly believe that me pausing before responding has been the biggest relationship game changer I've ever experienced. The shifts I've experienced have been profound enough that I've applied this approach to my more extended relationships, and I'm seeing nothing but improvement. Answer. I started doing this not too long ago, and it seriously is a game changer. I too have strong, big emotions, and I also get angry very easily. I've started to notice when I'm feeling angry or another strong emotion, and when I feel that, I will just walk away to cool down and think. I always tell the other person this, and that we will talk about it whenever I've taken a breather. I will also ask my friends for their opinion on it, whether or not I'm making something out of nothing. Story 19. This'll take 2 minutes to do. Fudge it. It's not that bad. Then you are cleaning, doing whatever for 30 plus minutes. Just getting over that. I don't want to be a. Story 20. I was born left-handed into a right-handed family and broke my left elbow in 3 places in the 3rd grade. And unlike the 2 times I sprained that wrist before that, I could not even pinch my left fingers enough to hold a pencil, and I was struggling to use my right hand to write, eat, or pretty much anything. I was so exhausted from trying that I took naps at recess and fell asleep during the skip, grade testing stuff. I was not allowed to join any clubs growing up since they prioritized my brother and mom's nieces, but a few teachers convinced my parents to have me join the math embroidery club with a waived fee. No clue if that is what it was called, but you had to do math to figure out the coordinates for each step of the pattern, to stick the needle in the black cardboard for the colorful string to make a pattern. Because of that club and getting one-on-one help, I was able to finally learn how to use my right hand. Now I'm ambidextrous, with the left hand being the slower one in writing. I still sometimes split tasks between hands, but there was never again a slowdown in me being able to do things, whether it was breaking my right wrist, graduating college, or having a messed up shoulder. Story 21. Watching Conan's final Tonight Show episode in 2010. This was when Jay Leno was pulling weight and essentially strong-armed NBC into taking the Tonight Show back, leading to a lot of controversy and acrimony on both sides, but mostly righteous disdain toward Leno. A lot of people were angry on Conan's behalf. I've never been a huge TV watcher, so I knew bits and pieces of Conan's comedy, but I wasn't that familiar with him. Some roommates had this episode on, so I watched. I was in my last year of my college and dealing with a psychologically harmful behavior professor at the time, also named Jay, incidentally. Conan's final message really ended up profoundly changing my life. The words themselves were correct and helpful and meaningful, but there was an unspoken subtext that I internalized that Conan was essentially saying, I don't need the permission of others to make people laugh. He publicly declared his gratefulness toward NBC for his career and for the chance to host The Tonight Show, while also clearly indicating that the thing he loves about comedy wasn't the prestige of the role he was being kicked out of, and that systems, whether it was NBC for him or academia for me, can't stop an artist who's determined to make art. I didn't actively think much about the episode in the aftermath of watching it, but in the years of hindsight since then, I took the lessons I learned from his 4-minute speech and used them for revenge against my circumstances in a way that I hope would make Conan proud by turning cynicism into motivation, bitterness into inspiration, and giving a proverbial middle finger to the concept of permission being required to make art. I graduated, left academia behind, carved out some modest success for myself as a composer, and made and continue to make creative things happen out of the things I learned, largely stemming from a lesson I didn't know I needed at the time. And it turned out he was completely right. I worked hard and tried to be kind to others, and sure enough, amazing things did end up happening. I'll never meet Conan, and he'll never know my name or my art, or what an enormous influence he ended up having on my life. I listen to his podcast regularly now and continue being inspired by the way he always seems to have something positive to say about everyone he's worked with over the years. And it's clear that it wasn't just for show. He really doesn't seem to hold any bitterness toward the circumstances he went through, which only further deepens what I learned from him. I can only hope that I can someday help right the ship for someone young and struggling like I was at the time, because my life is profoundly different for having followed his advice. Answer: I love your comments so much I got chills. So perfectly fitting for the discussion topic. I have saved it, and I'm going to check out that Conan farewell speech. Thanks for link. My favorite line: by turning cynicism into motivation, bitterness into inspiration, and giving a proverbial middle finger to the concept of permission being required to make art. Wow, beautifully written. Thanks so much for posting. Story 22. Took one creative writing class in university because I needed an English credit before I graduated. Enjoyed that class more than I anticipated and remembered why I wanted to be involved in the creative arts more than being a finance major. Only became one because parents told me to do something practical so you can make money because the arts will make you homeless. Still work in finance, but I have, since that class, been writing stories in my free time, trying to write a full-length novel at the moment. Also, why is the task of reaching out to literary agents so darn hard tedious? Query letters or eliminate me emotionally at the moment. I could self-publish, but I'm lazy and am not willing to go through the hassle of making multiple social media accounts, a website in order to self-promote. Answer: for that last part, it's probably so difficult because there's little profit in publishing unless you are known. Think Stephen King and the like. So it's kind of circular here, because the workaround to this is to make your own name for yourself in social media, lots of followers and engagement, so the agencies will pay attention to your outreach. I get why you don't want to do it. Building a robust social media brand presence is literally a whole career path in itself. Story 23. Picked up and moved to a new state after swearing off dating for life. My BFF convinced me to make a Bumble account just as a joke camaraderie for her. Met my husband within 3 hours. Story 24. Swiped right on my high school ex for shoot and giggles. We're now married with 2 kids 6 years later. Life is funny. Story 25. I picked up a shift while bartending from a sick friend. Wasn't normally working Sundays. Was a pretty slow day, but a guy walks in and I start talking him up. Turns out he works in the industry I was getting my master's in. He offered me an internship at a local company, and it turned out he was the CEO. 10 years later, I am still in that industry at a much larger company with a much bigger job. Picking up that shift literally changed my life. Story 26. Artist friends suggested I should try GoPro with my photography. I did and ended up with a very successful 36-year career. Story 27. I was very sad because I did not get into the sub-EV uni I was very obsessed about. I missed it by one point and got into a uni that I only signed up for if the worst-case scenario happens at this uni. I had the opportunity to get into a mentor program by successful company leaders. I built an amazing network, and my mentor got me into a startup community, In my town, at the community, I met a guy who is now my co-founder, and we are building our first company together right now as an electric car route planner startup for the country. This was my goal all along the way. I was very interested in the tech startup space. Everything happens for a reason. Story 28. When I was just learning my letters, my mom asked me whether I wanted to learn how to spell my name as the diminutive nickname or my full name. Think Bill instead of William or Tim instead of Timothy. I wanted to learn my whole name, not just a snippet of it. So I went through life being referred to by my full formal first name instead of buddy nicknames, and I think it affected how people saw me. Story 29. I worked in labor and delivery. I had a student shadow me. We never kept in touch or anything, but he got hired months after. I had no idea. One of his first shifts, his cohort was walking around the unit with a cohort's educator. We saw each other, and I did side jazz hands and exclaimed, "He hugged me." To this day, he swears I was going in for a hug first. We're engaged, and he's honestly my best friend. Story 30. Started playing Pokemon Go and joined a local Discord. I met plans to meet with a person at a nearby park to trade a Pokemon. Met the love of my life that day. 5 years later, I'm so grateful to have arranged that encounter. Story 31. So many. Most of life's adventures start just by showing up. The go-to was my whole life has most of the good stuff happen because I volunteered for choir in 4th grade. So my elementary school music teacher was looking to start a choir. I volunteered, but nothing came of it. He retired. In 6th grade, the new music teacher found the list and decided to chat up anyone who was still in the school, and I was. I was such a terrible singer, she asked if I'd volunteer for the school play, which I did. I got lead. This led to me being in community theater, where I met the punk and queer community as a preteen. In high school, the theater director was a burnout, so I quit. But some were in a local science fiction club, so I joined that. We went to science fiction conventions every year, so I started going as well. Fandom became another inroad into the punk and queer community. One of the conventions, I befriended the convention runner. He started employing me as an artist and panelist. When my mother died and I became homeless, a rental situation opened up with him, his fiancée, and 2 other roommates. Because he ran these conventions, I ended up helping out. And so I became a minor celebrity in local science fiction fandom. This led to connections impossibly good to me, a guy with no family to speak of. I met my first wife at one, the assistant of a vendor friend of mine. We married, had 1 kid. She died after 25 years, but I never regret the decision to marry her. It was a good marriage to an amazing person. I met my second wife a few years after my first passed. She was one of the people running a widow support group for fandom and a vendor. We have now been married for 7 years. My punk and queer connections blended into the goth world. Some of them helped me get my first IT job right as the dot-com boom started. I am now a senior Linux consultant making deep into 6 figures a year. Because of this job, I have a nice house in a good neighborhood, despite having no college degree. I have had 3 science fiction books published, was a writer for a comedy group, written several published short stories, and host or moderate panels at local conventions. I have met and befriended many celebrities. I have been MC at numerous cosplay events. One of them was an anime connection, which I worked with KEI for 21 years and eventually retiring as corporate president. I still work for 3 more. One of them does charity work for the queer community. One of the former comedy group members went into roller derby, asked me to volunteer, and I became a bouncer for the DCRG for 10 years, all because I signed up for my 4th grade choir. Story 32. Dad asked me how I was going to pay for veterinary school when I was 18. Found a group to volunteer with through Googling his question. I'm now a vet and work closely with the group I volunteered with 10 years ago. Don't want to dox myself, so it's vague, but I absolutely would not have this job or career if I never volunteered with them. Story 33. In college, I had been quite sick for several weeks and was finally feeling better, although quite bored of being stuck in the house. I complained to my roommate about said boredom. Being the fantastic roommate that she was, she told me her boyfriend's frat was having an invite-only cocktail party and that she would give him a call to see if anyone still needed a date. As it happened, his best friend's date had fallen through at the last minute, so even though we'd never met, he, the best friend, offered to take me. We instantly hit it off and both agreed to a second date before the first date was over. Fast forward to now, we've been married for almost 19 years and have built a great life together. And no, my roommate and her boyfriend did not end up together. In fact, they broke up about a month later. I lost touch with my roommate. However, my husband and I remained very close with friends with his fraternity brother and his wife. Story 34. I recently had a viral infection, kind of like the flu, but without coughing congestion. One night at the very end of it, I had some dizziness that wouldn't go away, and which ended up causing spots in my eyes. Decided to be cautious and go to the ER. When I got there, they did a chest scan and blood test, just to rule out any clots on my lungs, etc., and ended up finding out via the scan that my actual heart had a clot on it, and my troponin levels, the hormone that your body releases when your heart is in trouble, were around 1800. They should be around 14. I didn't have any chest pain or anything, and am 30 years old and relatively healthy, so it was a complete surprise. I ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks with suspected myocarditis, inflammation of the heart tissue, reduced heart function and wacky BP pulse, a blood clot on my ventricle, and another clot that spread to my spleen. I am only now just starting to feel normal again 3 months later, and am A, still on a host of meds, B, mildly traumatized, and C, still needing to see a specialist to diagnose exactly why this happened. They never could 100% confirm if it was myocarditis or an autoimmune response. My partner and I have also had to put our plans to try and conceive on hold until we see the specialist, as I have no idea how my body will cope with pregnancy. All because I decided to go to the hospital when basically feeling a bit dizzy. Story 35. My parents decided to transfer me from the local STEM magnet school to the most waspy, pretentious high school in the county school system. Seeing the utter disrespect and entitlement in those circles, i.e., rampant cheating with no consequences, thinking they deserve to take a smart kid's place in a pre-med program just for playing lacrosse well, harmful behavior, prescription substances, and bullying, verbally harmful behavior, the faculty for challenging them in class, made me lean harder into my love for science academics and decenter everything that makes such an American high school the way it is. Long story short, I ironically ended up more successful than if I had stayed in the STEM school, tried a whole bunch of academic competitions that I otherwise wouldn't have, studied a double major that my younger self wouldn't have had the confidence to do, and worked hard to move far, far away from that bougie cesspool. Story 36. After studying abroad for a year in college, I volunteered to man the booth at the Study Abroad Fair. As it was winding down, I got to talking to the booth across the way. I signed up for their program the next semester. I got there and my neighbor came over to introduce herself and invite me to go out with her and her friends. I'm not a partier, but she seemed nice and the girls were a riot, so I went. Her group was friends with a group of boys from the same dorm. Long story short, one of those boys is now my husband, and we've been together 23 years. I found my husband and the father of my children in another country because I volunteered for a fair. Story 37. High school junior, my computer science teacher was also the mom of a good friend of mine. I never had interest in comp sci, but one day passing by her room, she pulls me aside and asks if I took calculus. I said yes, and she says, "Great, you're going to be in my APCSA class." Apparently, she saw potential in me and also wanted more girls in her classes, and I obliged. Turns out it was really fun, and now am in my junior year of undergrad, majoring in CS and IT with a job offer already. Originally, I tried out pre-med for my parents, but realized it wasn't for me and was really stuck between what I should do, and she was always there to guide me to what I wanted. Because of her, I discovered CS, cyber, esports, and casting. I love her a lot. She had always been like a second mom to me, and she really shaped my future. Story 38, falling in a soccer game. 12 years of issues with now an unstable patellar tendon, and my kneecap doesn't sit in the groove. Story 39. On a whim, I took bankruptcy because it had the same professor that I already had in civil procedure, who I liked. It seemed okay, so then I took the bankruptcy-related electives. 2008 sure was a kooky year to graduate law school. I still do bankruptcy to this day. Story 40. After class, one of my college professors told me one of his former students had a job opening at his gym and was looking for someone to work part-time. At first, I blew it off as it didn't sound like a great fit. Later, I went back and asked him for more information. I ended up getting there and meeting another employee who 3 years later became my husband. Now we have been married almost 40 years. Story 41. Met a guy at a workshop who was from the UK, which was pretty cool, so I added him on Facebook. Ran into his colleagues a few months later, and we decided to take a selfie and send it to him as a small world kind of thing. We've been married 7 years now. Story 42. My boyfriend in college at the time said he was going to take an education class, so I signed up too. Prior to this, I was planning to go into law or marketing. Truthfully, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I fell in love with the field of education and still teach. Story 43. I grew up in a rural area, and my brother joined the local 4-H club because his friend was in it. So when I was old enough, I joined it because he was in it. I did 4-H for 13 years, K-12. I was very often the youngest person at any given event because I was just precocious, I guess. I earned tons of prize money from my fair projects, learned public speaking and leadership, developed poise and confidence. I hosted exchange students and traveled to Japan as an exchange student when I was 14, which is insane to me now. I also traveled to national conferences and made friends all over the U.S. Some of them are still friends of mine today. Most importantly, I learned record-keeping and organizational skills and won lots of county trophies. Nowadays, my job is to manage regulatory documentation for studies and clinical trials at a medical school. I love it, and I'm very good at it. Who knew? Story 44. I decided to have breakfast with my mom before going to my state's version of Comic-Con. I don't normally eat breakfast, but she seemed lonely eating by herself that particular morning. My time schedule was pretty tight that morning, but I thought I'd be okay. I ended up making it to the train station a few minutes before the train. Unfortunately, I ended up having problems getting the machine to print my ticket, causing me to miss boarding the train and have to wait for the next one. So now I'm standing on the platform, cross-playing as Loki, and waiting by myself for a half hour when suddenly this guy comes up and asks if I'm going to the convention. I tell him yes, and he mentions that it's his first time going, and he's supposed to meet up with a friend who is working at the ticket desk, but he's not familiar with where that is in the convention center. I offer to show him where to go because I have to pick up my ticket as well. Long story short-ish, after getting to the convention and showing him where to go, we went our separate ways. We then proceeded to accidentally run into each other 3 separate times throughout the day, even though it was a record attendance of around 127,000 people. On the last time, we opted to hang out since we were both attending one last panel before catching the train back to our city. He asked for my number on the train ride home. That was 10 years ago. We've been married for 8 years now and just welcomed our second kiddo into the world a few months back. Story 45. I was very hungover from a night of partying with my friends. A girlfriend called me the next day at 9 a.m., begging me to come to an outdoor festival with her, as she had an extra ticket due to her friend canceling on her. Dragged myself out of bed, did my makeup in the Uber, and met the man that would later become my husband at the festival. We're expecting our first baby together. Story 46. My parents asked me to take some asparagus to the woman across the street as a thank you for something I can't remember. Been married for 43 years, 4 children, 3 grandchildren. Story 47. Choosing my professor for grad school. In my country, your advisor doesn't matter that much. In that country, you're bound at the hip. Chose based on vibes, based on the 2 who had specialties, I found interesting. Prof ended up not choosing, helped me file the power harassment complaint 6 years of harmful behavior later. To be fair, he would have said hell no, and I'd have lost my scholarship had I chosen him. Story 48. I was looking for, as the ship I was on was sinking fast. A couple other employees had jumped ship to another company, which had a reputation for being hard to work for. Whatever. I apply. They reject me. I got mad because I needed a paycheck for a few months. I tried again. If they reject me again, oh well, I'll find another way to get money for a few months. I've been there 6 years, and it's the best place I've ever worked. I've met people who've changed me, started traveling per a butterfly effect of the job, gained new skills and a better resume on a much smaller scale, copped a Switch 2 and a new TV from it, among other things. I know life is unpredictable, and I'm not foolish enough to expect my career will finish there, but so far, it's definitely been a ride and it's not over yet. Story 49. Was a long-haired leather jacket, wearing early 20s punk who wanted AOME easy money, babysitting for a friend of a friend. We've been married for 26 years now. She's the best thing that ever happened to me, and my step-grandchildren are the most wonderful kids in the whole world. Story 50. I responded to someone's MySpace bulletins when I was up late one night. He fell in love with me eventually, and then I fell in love. Been 20 YRs now. He's my forever. Story 51. I'm always amazed by what could have been different if I went to a different high school, because a lot of what I do now and who I am is because of my friends. Story 52. Was about to turn 18, was my SR year of high school. Weather was awful, snow. I had promised my friend I'd take him to a punk rock show, but really wanted to bail. Ended up taking him and meeting the most important person I'd ever date. He passed a year or so later, and while I definitely dated after that, no one has ever quite measured up. Story 53. I was working as a research assistant at my university lab over the summer, and my professor asked if I'd be interested in going to a conference in Berkeley because they got a grant to send one student and none of the others could make it. I went and fell in love with the campus, so on a whim, applied to a master's program there. I got in, then when I graduated, got a job in CA, then met my husband here and now live and work here, and we have a baby together. Thanks, Artificial Photosynthesis Conference, haha. Story 54. I transferred colleges due to not being able to afford the original one I was going to anymore. I wasn't necessarily sad at the time about it, as I was dealing with a lot of other issues, and the transferring process in general was stressful, but I was neutral about the school. I ended up finishing my undergrad there, and about a year in, I went through a really tough breakup. It took me a while to get through it. I gave it my all in school, and it absolutely transformed my life and landed me in the career path that I am currently in. I signed up for an 8 a.m. class that had 2 professors who helped me get the job I have now. Who would have known an 8 a.m. class would transfer everything for me? I am very, very grateful for the whole experience to this day. Story 55. I gave some free shortbread cookies to a 4-year-old who stole the cookies that came with his parents' coffees when I was a barista. The internship those parents got me has pretty directly led me to getting a PhD. I just thought the kid was cute and otherwise well-behaved. Story 56. One day when I was a teenager, my dogs got out of the yard. This happened occasionally. They usually just ran into the neighbor's yard. As I was chasing them back to my yard, an animal control guy came over and yelled at me about having my dogs out in the street unleashed. I explained they dug out under the fence, and as he could see, I was in the process of getting them back in. He muttered something about a warning and handed me a ticket. I rolled my eyes, secured my dogs in the yard, and promptly forgot about the interaction. A few years later, I was on a tarmac about to board a military plane to deploy in the first wave to Iraq. My Army Reserve unit had been activated, and I was all lined up to climb the plane stairs when I heard an NCO yell out a bunch of names, including mine. I ran over to him with the others, and he told us we were all non-deployable for legal judicial reasons and to go home. Immediately, a few of the other guys mentioned speeding tickets they thought they'd cleared. I didn't even drive yet. I had no license. I was completely confused as I headed home. I eventually found out that wasn't just a dog catcher warning. I got a few years back. It was an actual citation that I'd never known needed to be paid, and I now had a misdemeanor warrant. It was an easy fix once I figured it out, and I didn't end up getting into any trouble with the military, but due to that, I never went to war. Story 57. I was 22 and making bad choices, like you do. I was late to work one time too many and inconvenienced the manager of the video store. I got fired. It was my final year of college and I thought spring break starts in a few days, and I've never taken a trip, and called my BFF. Her boyfriend's roommate, who I barely knew, answered the phone and told me he was getting a group together to take a long road trip. And I said, sure. If my bestie had answered, we'd have gone on a boring outing for maybe a weekend. It seemed so small at the time. We've been married for almost 26 years now, have 3 adult kids. We have been traveling all over North America in our RV. Story 58. I was on a trip with a friend when we were 18, and she convinced me to make a Tumblr account. It really didn't interest me, but she was persistent. Tumblr got me involved with a game I loved's community. That got me to go to a convention, which some of my online friends were also attending. That got me to meet the developers for the game I loved, where I became acquaintances with some of them. That made me realize that I could make games for a living too. It wasn't some faraway, ethereal career that other people did. Actual, cool, real people could find work in games. It's competitive, but attainable. I'd always wanted to be a writer since I was a kid, and to this day love storytelling, and I turned that along with my realization into a career. Now I'm a narrative designer for game. I've thanked my friend years later, we're in our 30s now, and she laughed and said that she doesn't take credit for my career. But I'm so grateful she convinced me to try out a site I hadn't been interested in, since the butterfly effect was literally life-changing. Story 59. Years ago, I worked as a security guard at a town center. One day I saw this pest control truck that had been circling the block a few times. That's the thing they train you to look for. So I walk up, and it turns out he's looking for a restaurant that doesn't have a sign up yet. Helped him out and gave him a tip for the easiest place to park and went on my way. 3 months later, I'm sitting at the desk watching the cameras because employees from that restaurant are taking the 5 prime parking spots, and the property manager wasn't happy with it. So for an hour each morning, we had to sit and watch. And if anyone parked there and went inside, we had to go note the license plate and report it. Sure enough, guy parks his SUV and walks inside. I go take the plate number. While I'm doing that, the same pest control guy walks out and asks me if everything is okay. Turns out he was in his personal vehicle. I told him what was up and that he was fine. He told me he was the owner and started talking my ear off about this job that he had available and was looking to hire someone, and would I be interested? All I heard was, you get to take the truck home. I was 24, married with 2 kids and 1 car, and flat broke. I jumped at the chance to have a company vehicle so we could avoid needing a second car. I said it would be a temporary job. Who really wants to work in pest control after all? It's been 12 years and I am 5 years into owning my own pest control business. All because I had to go write down a license plate number. The fun part of that story is that I got furloughed when COVID started. I couldn't go back to work full time due to the kids not having school. That's when I started the business, and my relationship with my former boss ended with him threatening me and having his lawyer send a cease and desist letter for a non-compete that they never made me sign. Story 60. Went with my parents to visit my grandparents for Christmas halfway across the country. They drove there a couple weeks early, but I decided to fly down by myself because I really wanted to stay home long enough to go see the first Lord of the Rings movie on its opening night with my group of equally Lothar-obsessed friends. If I hadn't stayed for a few extra days, I never would have met my future husband, which changed the entire course of my life. Story 61. In a rather unfortunate turn of events, I ended up in a psychiatric hospital when I was a teenager. The days were strictly regimented, but there was always a little free time right before lunch. One of the staff members would usually try to keep us patients busy with a quick game, while the others made sure food and meds were all in order. I couldn't tell you what the game was that day, but I can tell you that there were prizes. Candy, mostly. A couple of non-lethal trinkets. It was all in a pile in the center of the circle we were sitting in, and even though 99 of it was useless junk, we were all excited. The game, whatever it was, had been designed to have a winner every round too, so we were all pretty much guaranteed to get something. After days packed full of therapy, it was nice to have something just for fun. After a few rounds, I won, and I was allowed to pick a prize. As a chocolate fiend, I was sure I was going to snatch a lunchbox-sized candy bar, but something else caught my eye. A pack of colored pencils, rose art, the worst kind. But I remembered how I used to love drawing as a little kid. Summers spent with sidewalk chalk up to my elbows. 100 masterpieces scrawled on the backs of diner placemats in cheap crayon. Maybe I could get back into that again. I had a sketchbook I had been using as a journal. Why not try using it for its intended purpose? I took the pencils, and I tried to draw again. I was awful, but I kept at it, all through my inpatient stay, then outpatient, then back in regular school. I drew through all my classes because I was too overwhelmed to be present, and it was less conspicuous than reading a book. I started getting better, both at art and emotionally, when I switched schools. When I was allowed to choose classes for the fall, I decided to try art as an elective, and it snowballed from there. I am now a professional artist. I think about that kid in the ward every day, choosing pencils on a whim, and I wish I could reach through time and thank her. She gave me art, and she let me live. I owe her everything, and I'm going to do my best to make her proud. Story 62. Learn how to learn study. School was always so easy. Took AP Chem and nearly pulled my hair out. Never stopped learning and studying. Now in pen testing, I'm always learning and studying. Story 63. I messaged someone on Twitter about a somewhat similarly shared experience. Ended up with me moving across the states and enduring a life that forever changed me in both positive but extremely negative ways as well. Led me to meet a lot of very cool and famous people, but also completely lose myself in self-worth for a while. Story 64. Was procrastinating on an essay, as one does, that was due by the beginning of class at 9 a.m. the next morning. It was like 3 a.m., and I was on Omegle chat, got some actual good conversation with some rando. Well, we exchanged contacts and kept talking from there. Who knew a random chat session would turn into now being happily married for 9 years, and counting, and having a kid together? Story 65. Going one weekend without drinking because my sister may have needed me to drive 4 hours to see her and her kids at a moment's notice. She had some family drama going on. This happened when I was at the height of my drinking, where it was at least a 6-pack and 5-6 shots on a normal work night. That one weekend of not drinking got me to try going a week without adult beverage. Successfully going a whole week convinced me to try going another full week. Then that turned into the end of that month, which led to me trying another month. All in all, I went 18 months without so much as a sip. That year and a half helped me get a handle on my relationship with adult beverage and why I drank so much. All because of one weekend where I may have had to get on the road at a moment's notice. Oh, and I never ended up going as my sister got everything sorted and didn't end up needing my help. Story 66. My grandfather had a series of strokes before my birth that left him nonverbal, and he died before I turned 3. Despite this, I have a memory of him doodling Mickey Mouse, Kermit the Frog, and other little cartoons for me on a memo pad. I drew incessantly after seeing him do that. Studied art, graduated art school, and I now illustrate professionally. I wish I could tell him about it. Story 67. I put Alpha Centauri in the list of PC games I enjoyed when I wrote my online dating profile. My now husband told me he was already about 90 interested, but that one little detail not only sealed the deal, he didn't bother messaging anyone else. That was 12 years ago. Story 68. For me, it was this tiny habit I picked up almost by accident. Just writing down one thing I was grateful for every night. Sounds small, but over months it totally shifted how I saw everything. I started noticing the little wins and the small joys, even when life felt messy. Suddenly, stress didn't feel as heavy because I'd already trained my brain to catch the good stuff. Story 69. Decided to participate in her place in 2022 and joined a server to participate in making a specific art piece. 3 years later, I'm married to the person who ran that server. We probably wouldn't have met or talked regularly otherwise. Story 70. When I was at my lowest, most tragic endpoint, a friend came and packed up my apartment and forced me to live with her. She said your rent for the next few months is shower and do the dishes every day. It felt so fudge stupid, but I did it. Every day I showered and I did the dishes. After a few weeks of that, I started cleaning the counters and sweeping the floor as well, unprompted. I just started doing it. Then I started going on walks and taking better care of myself. She gave me just enough of little things that I could control that I started remembering that I was capable. It didn't cure my depression by any means, but it allowed me a modicum of time, space, and meaning that I could see and think clearly for the first time in years. I was able to refocus and finally got into therapy and on meds, and after a year I was able to live on my own again. I still have my dark days, never as bad as it was back then, but days when getting out of bed sounds like more than I can manage. And to this day, whenever those black days hit me, I force myself to shower and do dishes or clean the counter. Story 71. When I was in my early 20s, I hung out at a community college, not as a student, but just because it had a lot of grass and trees, so we treated it like a park. One day I got thirsty, so went to the student store to get a Gatorade, which was also the bookstore. I saw a book that caught my eye and started reading it, noticed it was associated with an upcoming course, and then on a whim, registered for the course. This was the 1990s, and it really was that simple back then. Long story short, I am now a professor. Story 72. This was a routine funny story my parents told to family and friends. When I was a toddler, my parents installed a screen door on my bedroom doorframe. I don't know exactly why this method was chosen or how long it had been installed at this point in time. Apparently, they were having a dinner party with family members, and I broke through the screen with wooden blocks. I then took my clothes off and ran downstairs, embarrassing my family. 30 years later, this funny story is much more telling. Instead of interacting and calming me, they isolated and controlled me. They were tired of me already, and this makes the next decades of my life make a lot of sense. And think about it. How long would I have had to have been alone to actually break through the screen with dull wooden blocks and squeeze myself through it? I would think a while. I have a brother too. He is 6 years older. Where was he? Downstairs with the rest of them. I chose to cut off my whole family 3 years ago. I had this revelation last week. This reinforced that my decision was correct. Story 73. Met this dude at the grocery store. Cute, but not my type. Figured this frat boy jock was good for a one-night stand. A funny story to tell, my friends. Anyway, WW just celebrated our 15-year marriage anniversary, and I'm snuggling with our 2 kids right now. Story 74. I was hanging out with some friends, and one friend brought another guy with her. I eventually got up intending to walk home, and the new guy offered to give me a ride. He seemed nice enough and pretty cute, so I accepted the ride. That was 15 years ago, and he's sitting next to me on the couch watching Mythbusters. Story 75. Believe it or not, getting laid off from my job. You would think that would never help me. Well, I was working doing pest control for a MAGA company that I had worked for years. They had said earlier in the week there would be no layoffs that year, so I just didn't think about it. A week later, I called the office to tell them a customer needed an extra service or something, and the guy from the office asked if anyone told me I was being laid off tomorrow. No one had, and yeah, it sucked. But I was the only female that worked there and was told females can't work men's jobs. So yeah, if anyone had to go, it would be me. I get paid off and am checking my mail, and a flyer from the community college had come in offering some service called Enrollment Express. I went to the event because I figured, oh, well, I'm laid off. I will have time to do classes, I guess. They were so nice and gave me so much hope. And I just turned in my final assignments for the 2 classes I took this semester and have officially completed 6 college classes and stuck with it for a year. That layoff also had me scrambling for a job, which led me to taking any job I can get. And now I make more than double what I was making doing pest control every 2 weeks in just 1 week. I own 2 cars now. Yeah, I work a lot and always seem to have homework, but I haven't given up yet. Story 76. I started putting $50 a month into my 401k and investing the money as soon as I was eligible. That one thing and some discipline to increase it every time I could, rather than spend it, helped me retire early. Story 77. I was walking out to my car for lunch after class. On my way out of the building, I passed by a recruiting table for a new program at my college. I was halfway out to my car. I was really hungry and didn't want to turn around, but I decided I should probably go back and get some info from the table, even though I was certain I wouldn't need it and I would be ineligible to apply. I applied to the program anyway and got accepted. That led to me getting an internship at a company I had always wanted to work for. When my internship ended, I was offered a part-time role until I finished college. I graduated 2 years later and was offered a full-time position working my dream job at that company. It's amazing to think how if I had just kept on walking that day, I may not ever have landed the job I always wanted. Story 78. I've told this before, but it still cracks me up. I was outside my law school building, finishing up a smoke after class and talking to a friend who had walked over after he got off work to meet up to go drinking. As we debated where to go get beers, a guy I sort of knew from class walked over from the girl he was talking to and bummed a cig off me. He heard what we were talking about and asked if he could come drink with us. I looked at the girl he had been talking to and said, "Only if you bring her." I was mostly joking. She and I have been together for 18 years, married for 12, and have a 7-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter. Story 79. Maybe my best friend from school getting a job in a particular city. I would later move there to house share with her after my job went remote during COVID because it seemed as good a place as any, and I'm still in the area 5 years later. Story 80. I used to bake Bisquick blueberry muffins and sell them at recess in the 2nd grade. I now am going on year 7 of owning a successful bakery. Story 81. I joined a fantasy book club in hopes of getting myself out of a depressive episode. I didn't really read fantasy at the time. I just wanted a way to get out and connect with people, and I put myself way outside my comfort zone and joined. The book club not only renewed my love for reading, but those people quickly became my best friends. Our husbands get along extremely well, and we hang out together all the time outside of book club. It's so nice saying as an adult that I have friends. I don't feel so alone anymore. I still have depression. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not lonely. Story 82. I saw a sign in my advisor's office about a medical lab in my city looking for laboratory assistants. I decided to apply. I now work in the lab industry and make decent money. It was just this little printed piece of paper on a receptionist desk that changed the course of my career. Story 83. My high school best friend and I had to pick a table to sit at for a class, and she said, "Oh, why don't we sit with Guy 1 and Guy 2, people she knew from middle school, which I didn't attend." Well, lo and behold, Guyan and I hit it off, and here we are 6 years later, strong. Story 84. I've always tried to be the friend that's there for people. Need help moving? Need a ride to the airport? DD, an ear? I grew up in a family where it really emphasized that phrase, you only look at someone else's plate to make sure they have enough to eat. I didn't realize how seldom the favors returned. A few years ago, after my ex and I broke up, I needed to get my car worked on. It was going to take a few hours, and I lived about 2 miles away. I was talking to someone I'd recently matched with on a dating app, and I mentioned that I was about to walk back. She dropped what she was doing and came to pick me up. I didn't have to ask her. She didn't ask me if I wanted her to. She just said, "Wait there. I'm on my way." We've been married for a little over a year now. Our house will be finished being built next month, and we're expecting a baby in June. Story 85. In high school, I suggested Time Warp Day for Spirit Week. Dress up as any past era. As part of my outfit, I wore red lipstick. Little did I know, this boy in my chemistry class already thought I was cute, but the lipstick just got to him, and he decided then and there that he was going to pursue me. He moved seats to sit by me. By the end of the week, I had a huge crush on him. The next week, we were each other's first boyfriend-girlfriend at 17. 13 years later, we've been married 5 years, own a home, and are expecting a baby girl in April. He still loves me in lipstick. Story 86. My Year 9 English teacher lent me a copy of her Terry Pratchett book, told me she thought I'd like it. He's my favorite author now and has been ever since. I went on a group tour through a bunch of European countries about 10 years ago. A guy from my city was there and we became friends. At the beginning of the year, we got together and now I'm pretty sure he's the love of my life. Story 87. Buying a fan and keeping it next to my bed. It feels like a core personality trait in a survival tool. Story 88. Meeting at about 2:45 p.m. on Friday, November 16, 1962, the girl who would one day be my wife and mother to my 4 children. Still going strong today, over 63 years later. Story 89. My favorite band came to town and I wanted to go, but none of my friends wanted or were able to tag along. The concert sold out before I could get a ticket, so I bought one off Craigslist the day before the show. I went by myself and got there early so I could get a good spot in the GA crowd. Ended up making friends with a security guy since I didn't have anyone to talk to. Now 9 years later, he's sleeping next to me in bed and our toddler is snuggled up between us. Story 90. One of my siblings went to a college in the middle of our border state. During my senior year, my parents told me to apply to that college along with the others already on my list. I had no intention of going there, but I outed an application because why not? I ended up visiting my sibling for an overnight, and I did like it, but I wasn't set yet. The next week, a very popular girl at my high school stopped me because she heard I visited and wanted to know if I was going there because she was too. I just said yes without even thinking. I graduated from the same college 11 years ago. I made some of my best friends and best memories there. I met my husband there as well. Best decision I ever made. Story 91. Got rejected from my biology grad program of choice around 2007 after a lifetime of overworking and overachieving. I didn't have a backup plan, so I got a temporary job to hold me over, and for the first time in a while, didn't have any studying to do at night. One night, I randomly started drawing a comic and posted it online. One thing led to another, and I've been in the comics industry for nearly 20 years now. From one random decision to start drawing, I've since published several books and won awards and worked with a bunch of cool people and currently work in the industry full-time. Yay, comics. Story 92. I wanted to make a roast for dinner, but instead of walking to my usual store, I went the other direction because I wanted to, I guess. Can't even say why. Saw a job offering at a state office, took the job, got help with finding a therapy spot by my workplace, got diagnosed, and have a chef who believes in my talents. All because I wanted a roast from a different store. Story 93. My amazing 5th grade teacher once casually told me he admired my kindness. I didn't necessarily think I was any more or less kind than my classmates, but for him to mention it made me really believe that was a positive trait of mine. I'm obviously human and have my moments, but to this day I try to treat every single person with kindness. If for no other reason, I don't want TP let Mr. McLean down. Story 94. Nothing too big. Typing class I took in a high school my senior year. What's weird is I actually wasn't too good at it. Post-graduation, I consciously tried doing it and couldn't. Went back to typing with my index fingers. 2 weeks later, I noticed I was typing really quick and efficiently. Looked down and my hands were just moving effortlessly. Story 95. I wanted an easy, low-key office job after college. Got an admin job in property management. I figured I would just figure it out from there and wait it out until I found my future glamorous marketing or social media job somewhere 10 years later. I've risen through the ranks of commercial real estate and actually like what I do. But my job is neither low-key or easy anymore. You truly just never know where the road will lead you. Story 96. Having a nice lazy bang with my husband on a Sunday afternoon. Now we have an awesome 3-year-old. Story 97. Chose a computer science class instead of taking chorus in high school. Not only did I learn a ton of useful and interesting skills, the teacher hooked me up with my first office job that not only paid super well, but helped me build a really impressive resume before I even went to college. Story 98. One summer during college, I had 2 job opportunities. I don't remember now why I picked one over the other, but I'm glad I picked the job I did because I met my husband there. We've now been married almost 30 years and have 2 kids. Story 99. Friend convinced me to go to the local pub with their friends. Not normally my thing. Went for a smoke in the smoking area and some bloke kept looking at me. Thought he was cute, but I'm not a talk to strangers kind of person. I finished my smoke, smiled at him in acknowledgement, and went back inside, thinking I only have to tolerate this place for another hour and then I can make excuses to leave. About 20 minutes later, I find my very tipsy friend who insists I need to meet some guy and literally pushes me through a gap in a hedge to meet the bloke from the smoking area. I agree to hang out with him for a bit because I figure I have nothing to lose spending one night chatting with this guy who's clearly half tanked. It's been almost 15 years and we have 2 kids. All because I smiled at a tipsy guy at the pub. Story 100. Was asked to cover night patrol for 2 hours after my regular day shift. Sure, why not? It's only 2 hours. Got hit on my driver's side by an intoxicated driver going 90 miles per hour. 9 weeks in hospital, left side of body broken, still recovering. Story 101. I was supposed to go on a date with this girl and met on Tinder, but she told me the morning that we were supposed to go on our date that she had gotten back together with her ex. Whatever, I'll go back on Tinder and see if I can't find someone else. And find someone else I did. That was the day I met my now wife and soon-to-be mother of my first child. Story 102. Felt a little lost in college what I was going to try to do. I was very curious, did student orgs had jobs? Tried out research. One day as a sophomore, I randomly opened the school newspaper and flipped through it and read an article about one of the faculty's research areas and his projects. My mind was blown and I knew I had found my thing. That was 20 years ago. It has been a difficult but awesome journey, and I am now a professor doing the work that I love, inspired by that one article. Story 103. Decided to not go home one day after school. Went home with a friend instead. Parents knew. I haven't stepped foot in that childhood house since the day before I chose not to go home. I thought I'd go home the next day, but instead I came to school with my life packed in garbage bags. Had been kicked out. Story 104. Wake up early in the morning so I can manage my all works easily. Also, I did start morning walk and some stretching. In early morning, overall, my all productivity has been significantly increased. Sorry for bad English. Story 105. Gonna out myself, but psychiatric medications never felt effective and pretty useless till I woke up one day a couple months later and noticed I felt completely fine. I had really bad symptoms for years, decades even, and the right combo has made a solid difference. Still have symptoms and progress to make, but boy does it feel more manageable. Story 106. 300 memory foam mattress. Holy fudge crap, it's so comfortable. Literally everyone that's been on my bed loves it. I don't even need a pillow. Story 107. I was hanging out in the school library one day, doing some work on a computer. I saw an ad for a 3D software called SketchUp and thought, hey, that looks pretty cool. I went home that afternoon and started playing around with the software, which had a free version. This spark evolved into a hobby, which evolved into a passion that consumed most of my free time and led to a desire to go to college and pursue a career. It's been about 17 to 18 years since that day in the library. I've now been working as a product designer for the better part of a decade and have become very successful in my field. Story 108. During an appointment, I offhandedly mentioned to the doctor that I had had a dream a few nights before that I was running and I woke up with a fast heartbeat, all out of breath. He looked at me funny, then sent me to a cardiologist. Quad bypass a few weeks later with a 97 Widowmaker that would have eliminated me. That was over 15 years ago. Story 109. I got lost looking for a math or science class in the agriculture building. I bumped into an acquaintance who I hadn't seen for a year and a half. She laughed and told me I was in the completely wrong building. 2 buildings on campus were next to each other, mirrored. We exchanged numbers. We hung out a few times, then started dating several months later. We got married 6 years later and have now been together for about 26 years. Story 110. Me, sitting in a geoscience elective nearly 7 years ago. Soils prof, there are jobs in soil science, but almost none of you will go down this track, so let's just have fun in this course. So anyway, I've been classifying soils as part of my job for the past, 6 years now. Story 111. Got home from college, unsure of next steps. Was thinking about federal level law enforcement, shudder, and my mom said I should talk to an acquaintance husband who works in law enforcement. I wasn't excited about the prospect, but I reluctantly went to see him. He was captain of the airport unit, and we hit it off. I got offered a job on the spot, and there I met my wife, who worked at an airline, and here a sight 27 years later, happily married. But basically, every decision you ever made brings you to where you are. That's how time works. Story 112. I thought I just had a sinus infection, so I went to the doctor. It turned out to be a brain tumor. Not cancerous, but still horrifying. It was on a track to eliminate me. My surgery was a partial craniotomy with a long list of possible risks: losing my speech, smell, vision, mobility, or even my life. I was in my mid-20s at the time, and I was terrified. The surgery went unbelievably well. I woke up with no deficits at all. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchus. See you soon.